G'day guys, back again. So in this vid, we're going to talk about the backrest, how I fabricate these. So I've done curved backrest a bunch of different ways over the years, including steam bending, thicker strip lamination. But for this one, I've chosen to do a thin strip lamination. I just find it's got a much cleaner finish than doing steam bending. And in the past I've done 4 10mm strips, steam bent them and then glued them up. I just don't think I'm not able to get a strong enough glue joint to do it that way. It's okay, but it's not perfect. Whereas doing these, because as soon as it's in the steam box, you're raising the grain, and then when you try to glue that together again, so I'll put in the steam box, press it on the form, take it off the form, glue it up, press it back on the form. But yeah, you just don't have a solid face to glue to. I feel like yes, anyway. So what I've done with these guys, and what I do most of the time, is I'll do a strip lamination. In this is a 40mm thick backrest. You've got 10 strips at 4mm. To get that, I start with a wide board. I think the boards were 260, and a 260 wide board is so 260 by 50, because it's all rough sawn stock. I flatten it, right? So I take off this is 40 by 40. So I flatten the 50mm stock. I think I got it down to 47. Okay, I probably don't want to go below 45 because I want to keep it as thick as possible, because we're going to machine it once it's been formed to a 40mm thickness. So I'll machine it down to 47, as in on the jointer and then through the thicknesser, 47 if you can. And then I take it to the jointer and I get my first straight edge. Once I've got that straight edge, I'll lay the piece down, draw a triangle on it so that I know, because we're about to cut this into strips, I want to make sure I've got some sort of guide to know how the strips go back together. A triangle is just, I don't know, it's a basic language. I learned that as an apprentice. Easiest way to just know where you are. Once one side's jointed, set up the saw and I rip it to 4.5mm. We want a 4mm finish, so 4.5mm on the saw. I've done this on the bandsaw in the past, and some might say bandsaw is better, whatever. There's no right or wrong way to do this. For me, bandsaw, might save a little bit of material, but it's gonna take a bucket load longer than it is on the table saw. So if I didn't have as much material to work with and I was pressed to get it out of thinner stock, I might use the bandsaw. In this case, to get a 40mm thick finish, I only need 86mm stock, that's including the waste from the table saw and the waste from the thicknesser. So for 86mm, I feel like I'm going to save probably a couple hours doing it on the saw than I would doing it on the bandsaw. For me, I balance that, and it's worth it to do it on the saw. Like I said, no right or wrong way. If I had less stock and I was hustling to get it done, I might use the bandsaw. So my process was rip it to 4.5mm. Once I've done my first rip, chuck that on the thicknesser, and then I take the stock back to the jointer. Again, do a fresh joint so that I've got a fresh, clean face. Take that back, rip it to 4.5, and that process basically: rip 4.5, join, rip 4.5, join. Once I've got all my stack of 10, I will then chuck them through the thicknesser. I've got a little slip board that I use to thickness them, because so that they don't get, it's just what I've always used, they don't get stuck on the rollers. And it just makes a much cleaner finish for doing thinner strips. Maybe I can talk about that another time. Once they're all done to your 4mm thickness, I then tape. So I've done, like I said, this project we had 6 backrests. So I take the 6 backrests, I put them in their stacks, the stacks that they're going to be, so they're all grain matched. I'll tape up the ends to keep them together, chuck them back on the timber rack, and then I go and I glue up one at a time. So I do have the full build of the Layla chair up on my YouTube, but I lost a third of the files, a third of the video. So I didn't include the actual glue up and the making of the bobbin legs, which I'll do, and I'll talk through that process in another video. So, but basically, to glue up the backrest, we have a form, and I've got plenty of different forms. This is probably the easiest form for me. I don't know if there's other ways to make them. But yeah, this has just got an internal radius and then a lot of holes for clamping. Basically, to get a good finish, you need excellent clamping pressure. So once I've got my strips all sorted, I do 1 glue up a day for the project. and I lay my strips out, roll on with a roller so that it's a really good soak, you know, make sure that that glue is getting into the grain. I don't want too much that I'm going to get masses of squeeze out either. I want it, but I want enough that there is going to be squeeze out, just not heaps. It just takes practice, you'll figure it out. Once I get it together, I tape the ends. Once I assemble it with the glue in, I just tape the ends to kind of keep it in place. I get my 3mm bar, right? This is just some 3mm metal, and I tape it to my bar, set this up over my form, and then with the winch on my table, it gently pulls it so that the form is pressed against the timber's pressed against the form. The 3mm bar just acts as like support for it, and I just find it, I've done it without it, but with the bar it gets such a cleaner finish, and you're able to use the winch on it, which just saves time and makes it nice, just makes it nice and tidy and easy. But that's just the start. Once that's on, all the clamping pressure, a lot of pressure. You want that squeeze out. You want to make sure when you're gluing these up that the timber isn't slipping, which is why I tape it. The tape's not going to be everything, but it does help a lot. But and that's again why we're machining these up if we can only to 47, because if there is slippage, you want to be able to take that off on the jointer once they're glued up. Basically, glue them all up, leave them for the day. The next day that I take them off, we strip lamination just like we're steam bending the spring back. I don't know, it's about 5mm on these, and this internal radius is 470 internal radius, and you get around 5mm spring back. What I do to counter this is as soon as they come off, I put them in a clamp again, and I over clamp it around 10mm, and I just let them sit. Letting them sit for a week, I find that tends to reduce the spring back and they get to a pretty even spot. Once they're all done, and the chair frame, so I let them sit until the frame is finished. So once I've finished the frame and I've glued it up, and I need to use the backrest, that's when I get my frames out, my backrest out again, chuck them on the jointer, nice surface joint. We're just trying to make it flat and square. There's a little bit to it, so I'll always test them on a flat surface, as in see where my high and low point is, and then I'll adjust as I'm going over the jointer. Joint, check, adjust, joint. Once, what I also note before I join is any defects in the timber. So some of these had some sapwood up on the top corner, stuff like that. So I'm obviously not going to have the sapwood on, I don't want the sapwood to connect to my legs, because that's going to make a point of contrast, and I just don't want that. It's going to look tacky. So I make sure that basically the joining edge the face that we join is going to be the face that is going to glue onto our legs. Because we're going to rip these on the saw, I'm never going to join a ripped edge in a glue up. I mean, obviously end grain, I'm going to have to do that, but not with a face join. That's silly. So the joining, making sure that my joining face is my nice face, chucking on the joiner, over onto the saw. So the saw, just set my rip fence up to 40mm, and I don't have my blade that high, and I just gently feed it through. I know this looks a bit, I don't know, dangerous, and I've posted it on the gram before, and a few people have mentioned, and yeah, I probably don't recommend other people doing it, but for me, it's same with doing this on the jointer. You know, you've got a large exposed blade there. I'm super comfortable doing this process. Not once has it felt risky for me, and I think maybe that's got to do with the fact that I know my machines really well. I've built, you build up a relationship with them over the years, and if you're, because I'm confident in my abilities and my connection with my tools, it's not an issue. If I was, I basically, what I'm trying to say is I don't do things that I feel are risky. I don't do that. I'm really conscious of safety in my shop. And the only reason why I do these processes is because they're comfortable for me. That said, I do not, if you're not confident doing that kind of process, find another way to do it. There's plenty of other ways to make these, but yeah, that's my process. Hope that makes sense. In the next videos, we're going to chat about how I shape the backrest for the frames. We'll talk about the bobbin legs, and we'll talk about the glue up. Cheers.